afternoon, everyone. I am Rose Joshua, President of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Chicago Southside Branch. Welcome to Conversations with the Candidates, a candidate forum sponsored by the NAACP Chicago Southside Branch and the Lambda Mu Omega and Chi Omega chapters of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Also, thank you to Green Grove Missionary Baptist Church and Pastor Terrell Carter for hosting this forum. As the nation's oldest civil rights organization, the NAACP is committed to educating our community to ensure that Black voters are engaged in the political process and vote in every election. To that end, the Chicago branch of the NAACP invited candidates in the June 28 election to a conversation to discuss their qualifications for office in which they are running. The topic of the conversations will focus on the NAACP's game changers, such as health, criminal justice, civil rights, education, economic development, and environmental and climate justice. And the other one is voting rights, which is mostly important. These are issues that have the most disparate impact on Black communities. So it is important to know where candidates stand on these issues. I will now turn this over to the moderator, which will be Louis Raymond, and he will introduce the interviewer and the candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone who's here at Missionary Grove Baptist Church. My name is Louis Raymond. I am a member of the Political Action Committee of the NAACP Southside Branch. Our fifth conversation for the day is with Mr. Jaylin D. McClinton. Mr. McClinton is a recent graduate from law school who has participated with Obama for America and various other Obama administration positions. He will be interviewed with Ms. Pam Sadell. Ms. Sadin is an attorney and second vice president of the NAACP's Southside Branch and chair of the Political Action Committee. Let's welcome them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Raymond.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Raymond. Hello, Mr. McClinton. It is nice to meet you, and welcome to Green Grove Missionary Baptist Church. The NAACP Southside Branch is glad that you're able to join us this afternoon and tell us a little bit about you and why you want to run for Cook County Commissioner of the 5th District. Let's first by learning a little bit about you personally, your family, where you live, and your current employment. What are you doing now?
Definitely. Thank you so much, and thank you to the NAACP for having me here. This is an organization that I've been involved with for as long as I can remember as a card-carrying member, and I certainly look forward to working with the Southside chapter moving forward. But for me, my journey begins at a hospital that is no longer in existence, Michael Reese Hospital. I was born there and then whisked off to the south side of Chicago in Roseland, and was raised there by my mother and grandparents. And my grandmother, whose shoulders I stand on, Bertha Cross, is still living, and she has Alzheimer's, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I'm talking about healthcare. But she moved to Chicago from Mississippi, Grenada, Mississippi, all with the thought to give her children and eventual grandchildren a better life. And so for me, education has been paramount in my life for as long as I can remember, from attending St. Sabina, to Curie High School, to the University of Illinois, where I graduated from in 2016, and as you mentioned, most recently from the Chicago College of Law. And so when I think about education, I truly believe that that's the great equalizer, and it's something that has really guided my principles to date, and it's the reason why I'm so passionate about public service. Dating back to probably high school was my first experience with real democracy in the sense of getting out there and being active. Now, I mentioned I went to St. Sabina, and of course, learned the values of social justice from a pretty vocal white Catholic priest by the name Father Michael Flager very early on, connected with the struggles that my grandparents had in Mississippi and moving to Chicago. But for me, my public service journey started in high school when I was a student in the MCFA Challenge program about a decade ago, or a little over a decade ago, serving as an election judge. And I think that that's something that over the years since has stuck with me as I've continued to progress, so much so to the point that I'm now running for Cook County Commissioner in the 5th District.
Thank you. Thank you for that overview of your background and history. So what, in your opinion, are the duties of that particular office? And how are your qualifications, background, how do they meet the requirements of those duties?
Sure. So, when I think about Cook County government, there are really 6 core functions that I view as being paramount in the issues that people in this role should be focused on. First and foremost, our health and hospital system. As Ms. Gordon mentioned, from the moment you're born to the moment that you have your last breath, you're entangled in our healthcare operation. And so for me, I think that that's something that Cook County commissioners will have direct oversight of, given that it's one of the largest portions of the budget, and the county, I think, has the 3rd largest health and hospital system in the country. And so when we think about that, just making sure that people have what they need, right? We're still in a pandemic, and I think that in our community in particular, the powers that be would like to just kind of skirt past this pandemic and get back to business as usual. But we know that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted communities of color and Black communities in particular. So I think healthcare. I think also our criminal legal system and public safety apparatus. Now, I just mentioned that I graduated from law school, but for me, right, as a Black man, I didn't just wake up today and all of a sudden start to understand the issues entangled within our criminal legal system. I know them firsthand, being pulled over by police with my mom when we were simply just jamming to tunes, but because of the color of our skin, we had a different experience. And so when I think about our criminal legal system and public safety apparatus, it's about accountability, but also making sure that there's justice and fairness in the system too. And that's something that I hope to prioritize as well. Just the other 4 issues quickly, economic development and job opportunities. We know that the Southland and the South Side, where I live in Roseland, have been strategically disinvested from for decades. And so we need someone who's going to speak up and speak out often about the strategic disinvestment and work with a variety of players to make sure that the resources are coming in so that people in that region of Cook County have what they need. Again, just quickly, there are 3 other areas that I view as being very important. Our environment. The county has oversight of our forest preserves, and I think in the 5th District, we really need to have conversations about maintenance and upkeep at a lot of our forest preserves, because it's inextricably linked to quality of life. If your environment is positive and you have access to Maslow's basic needs, clean drinking water and healthy fruits and vegetables, which I will add that there are pockets as I sit here today in my district, people don't have access to that. And so we have to talk about those things and talk about them often. The last 2 areas are just rooting out fraud, corruption, and government waste. I think, across the board, whether it's in the 5th District or across Chicago and Cook County, there's a lot of corruption that has really permeated our system and has just cause people not to do the right thing. And I think coupled with that, making sure there's an engaged citizenry, right? Making sure that there are strong constituent services. As I'm going door to door, people don't even know what their Cook County Commissioner can do for them or who it is, and I think that's a problem in itself. We can't just have voting rights and not have people who are actually engaged in our democracy, and I think that that's something that we really need to be focused on, because there are many positions at the local level that people do not pay attention to, and those are the positions that have the most fundamental impact on people's day-to-day livelihoods.
Thank you. You mentioned about engagement and voting, so we'll move on to that pillar of the NAACP's game changer. You live in the 34th Ward, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, and as we know, it has been redistricted to the north side, so it is now majority white ward. They say that that is because there have been people who've left the community. Do you think it's truly that, or is it that people weren't engaged in participating in the census, which affects redistricting?
Absolutely. I think it's a combination of both. I do think that there are some people who have departed our region of Chicago and the Southland where we are as it relates to the census, but it is about engagement too, and we know that the census took place at the height of a first of its kind pandemic, and so when I think about that, depending on who you ask, there are people who are kind of celebrating the fact that there's a new ward coming to the north side, but it's not okay because it's Black people who are getting the short end of the stick when it comes to representation and making sure those resources are divvied up appropriately. And so we have to be talking about equity and justice in this process too, because it's not right, and people have to say that more often.
Now, let's turn to the Cook County jail system and the new issues or legislation that's going to take place in 2023 with the bail bond reform. So the bail bond reform becomes effective in 2023. What do you think of the no cash bail provision?
Look, I just mentioned that I graduated law school. I'm a firm believer in the presumption of innocence, and I think the General Assembly worked very hard on that proposal, and it's something that has been supported overwhelmingly across the Black Caucus. The sponsor actually is an endorser of mine, which I'm proud of, and I just think when we think about our criminal legal system and public safety apparatus, as I said earlier, right, I want accountability in the system, but I also want it to be fair, and I think that when we think about punishment as the only model, we know that that doesn't work. We've seen it time and time again in our politics. And when you think about the war on drugs in particular, we've been there, done that. And so I think for me, when we're thinking about our criminal legal system, we have to get back to the root causes of why violence and crime even take place in the first place. And I will tell you that it goes back to the conversation I had earlier about Maslow's basic needs being met. If people had clean drinking water, if people had healthy fruits and vegetables, if people had a job with a livable wage, crime would be mitigated. And so that's what we have to get back to, and that's what I plan to advocate for on the Cook County Board.
Do you have any ideas or suggestions on exactly how to do that as a commissioner?
Sure, I think it's about calling out the need for resources and being a direct advocate. And I think, again, speaking up in a way that speaks to the needs of the 5th District directly, right? This is a district that has, at one point, some of the poorest municipalities in the country. And we have to talk about that in terms of resources, because I will tell you, while I will work with every single commissioner on that Cook County Board, we have to do so in a way that's equitable and just. And I'm not going to sit idly by as we're having conversations about resources and acting as if a place like Evanston or Lincoln Park or another insert wealthier or affluent northwest suburb, they don't need the same resources that a place like Roseland or Dixmoor with the water crisis, or Ford Heights or Robbins need. And so we have to be talking about those things and talking about it in a way that centers equity and justice in the budgeting process. I think also it's about activity and engagement and being present in the community. You know, I think things like town halls are important to talk directly to constituents, but we can't just stop there. How are we engaging people so that when this election is over on June 29th, because whoever the Democratic nominee is will eventually win this race, what are we doing to build on this election so that on December, I think 18th, whenever I'm sworn in, we're already ready to go in terms of making sure that things are done in the community in a way that can move the 5th District forward collectively.
So are you talking about putting forth legislation? So what I'm looking for is what actions are you looking to do to address these issues? You've spoken very well on what the issues are and the causes for them, but as a commissioner, what would you do? What actions would you take?
Sure. I think it's a combination of things, and happy to clarify that. You know, I think it's legislation on the campaign trail. I talk often about the fact that, you know, look, I went to law school to get away from math. I'm good at math, but I wanted to get away from it. And so when we think about our levers of government, both at the federal level and locally, right, you have 435 members of Congress, 100 US senators, 118 state house members, 59 state senators, 50 City of Chicago aldermen. So when we think about getting to that minimum number to get anything done, it's a lot higher. And so when I think about the county board, equity and justice are achievable because all I have to do is convince 16 other people. And quite frankly, it's only 9 because you just need a quorum. And so legislation 100% will be a part of my strategy in all the areas that I just mentioned to you. But again, I think it's also galvanizing the community and making sure that they have a stake in policy development too. And then also leveraging the other relationships that I have at the state and federal level, legislators, members of Congress, thinking about businesses, whether they're small or large brands, and working together to put together something that is meaningful for the 5th District from all of those different angles.
I have one last question. We'll go on to the health system. So Cook County, as you mentioned, has a direct responsibility for health care and criminal justice in Cook County because it runs the Cook County hospitals and the Cook County jail, with minorities experiencing higher rates of disease and death for chronic illnesses and the closing of medical and mental health centers in the Black community. What plans do you have to increase the opportunities and access to health care in the Black community?
Sure. You know, I think for me, again, healthcare is something that is paramount in our community. When I think about my grandmother's Alzheimer's, as I mentioned, that's something that I think for myself and my mom, who are now both caregivers, you know, 5-6 years ago, I say we were in disbelief about what we saw happening right before our eyes, but it's something that plagues a lot of Black families, and I think making sure that those signs are picked up early and often is going to be critically important. And so when I think about ailments like Alzheimer's, I know at the General Assembly level there have been bills passed around support for that. Making sure that it's implemented properly at the local level is something I'm committed to. I think when we think about all of these other ailments that plague our community, whether it's asthma, cancer, diabetes, working to tackle those things by making sure that additional clinics are available, making sure that clinics are funded. We know in the 5th District proper, there isn't necessarily access to a level 1 trauma center. And so having conversations to make sure that the resources are there, because someone shouldn't have to travel up to 15 miles or 10 miles just to get to a hospital, which saves their life in the bottom line. And so I think advocating for all of those things will be a huge priority for me too. And I think also supporting the health infrastructure in place. You know, a lot of times, people in the community, and I think it's most paramount because I live in Roseland, so that's the hospital that I hear often about, is always on the chopping block. And you know, people are more comfortable getting in a car going 10 to 15 miles west to go to Christ. And when we think about that, why don't people feel comfortable with the healthcare structures available in their own community? And so I think making sure that there are resources, using the county's budget, and being innovative with ideas to make sure that people can tap into healthcare resources will certainly be a huge priority.
Well, thank you very much. I see your passion, your commitment, based upon your own experiences living in Roseland, because you mentioned on your website that you've seen the negative effects and neglect and corruption firsthand, and how that will shape how you will be a commissioner in the 5th District. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, President Joshua.
Thank you so much, Jaylin. Could you define, in your own words, the meaning of equity? And could you include some examples from your platform of what you want to do, where you would incorporate equity?
Sure. So when I think about equity, you know, the image that pops up for me is, and you may have seen it before, but it's the one where, you know, you have equality on one side and everyone just has their little crate. And then equity is on the other side, and the smallest person has the tallest crate, the medium-sized person has a medium crate so they can see, and then the tallest person has a small crate. And so that's my definition of it, right? It's making sure that people have what they need. And I think that that's going to be critically important for me in this position. And again, I plan to work with the mayors, other elected officials in the region to move the entire 5th District forward. And I think for me, equity and justice will be paramount in every single kind of platform area that I talked about, from healthcare to our criminal legal system, right? Calling out the systemic racism that has permeated a system and has allowed people like us to be criminalized simply because of color of our skin. So I plan to talk about justice issues a lot. And then I think just in terms of how we budget and making sure that when we present a budget, first at the county board and to the people, that it's a budget that speaks directly to the people who need resources the most. And so I'm excited about the county's basic income program. I know it's targeted primarily in the Southland, which I think is great, but let's start talking about how we get resources to expand that. Because the way to help people at our bottom line is to give them what they need, and that's money and strategic resources and dedication.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Ms. Singh, as well as Mr. McClinton. We hope the audience found this conversation to be useful in deciding which candidate to vote for in the Cook County Commissioner for 5th District race. Once again, membership is the lifeblood of the NAACP. If you would like to join the NAACP Southside Branch, please visit our website at naacpcss.org. You may join for as little as $35 per year. We also invite you to our monthly general meetings held every third Saturday of the month via Zoom. You may also find the Zoom information on our website. Once again, it's naacpcss.org. We are not done for the day. Please continue with us as we have one more conversation with Cook County Commissioner Candidate for the 2nd District, Mr. Andre Smith. Thank you so much.